This is James Volpe Rotundi with Premier Guitar Magazine. Look for me on Instagram at James Volpe Rotundi or JVR on guitar. Today I'm delighted to be bringing you the new PRS Chleo. Now, some of you, especially those of you who follow metal and symphonic metal in particular, may recall that earlier in 2025, PRS released a limited run of rather pricey but very full-featured signature guitars with Herman Li of DragonForce, a guy who's sweep picking and sort of arpeggios and speed playing are really pretty exemplary. And DragonForce, his band, have a huge number of fans worldwide and have really helped put symphonic metal on the map. Responding to that, PRS put out a fine signature model called the Chleo. Now, demand for the instrument evidently was pretty high, and in the interest of getting the guitar into the hands of more players, PRS and Herman put together a sort of scaled-down package, but still fairly full-featured package of the Chleo, called the PRS Chleo SE. Some of you may be fond of, or at least know about, PRS's SE models for the Silver Sky. Mark Holcomb has an SE model. David Grissom has a very, very good SE model. Anyway, this follows in that tradition, although it is a very different kind of SE and a very different kind of PRS. In particular, the shape of it is not your typical PRS shape. It has these sort of thin cutaway horns on it that are a little reminiscent of an 80s guitar called the Viet Cintron that some of you may recall. Also reminiscent of some of the new Music Man guitars that I've seen out there. It's a fine guitar, and it's definitely made for the modern metal player. The neck is quite slender in the back. I mean, a C-neck feels fat compared to this thing. What that kind of means is you have a lot of control. Also, very flat neck. A 20-inch radius. 20-inch radius. Strats usually, even when they're sort of graduated, they usually only go up to maybe a 14. Les Pauls typically clock in around 12. So a 20 is a very flat neck. And what's the advantage of that? And I think especially for players who play a certain type of modern metal music is that your hand posture kind of remains very much the same throughout a lot of the figures you may be playing. Which is to say, an arpeggio here is going to really feel much the same up here, despite the fact that, of course, the frets are narrowing a little bit in terms of their distance from each other. Also, because it has a cutaway all the way up to the 24th fret, you really do have access to a pretty uncanny amount of register options with this guitar. Imagine playing a blues scale up here on the on the 20th or 21st fret. Now, many of you may not do that, partly because metal tends to be such a shall we say, a diatonic sort of musical form. So, but what this guitar really does, and I think does exceptionally well with its Floyd Rose 1000 tremolo system here, locking nut, etc. This is actually a really fine Floyd Rose. I like this Floyd Rose. I'm not always the biggest fan of Floyd Roses, which sometimes I think has to do as much with the generation you came up with as anything. But the Floyd Rose in this guitar is really great. Doing your sort of micro-tuning adjustments up here seems quick and reasonably accurate. If you go one lock at a time up here, you should get a pretty close to a spot-on tuning. And then, you still have to do a little micro-tuning adjustments up here. But at any rate, I think the thing that really makes this guitar special is these pickups. And other reviewers have talked about these pickups. There's 3 pickups, and they are the Fishman Omniforce pickups, which are part of the Fishman Fluence line. And Omniforce is sort of Herman Li's particular design. Now, you have choices of voices with these pickups. If you have both the tone and the volume pot down, your 5-way selector blade right here gives you basically a sort of very modern metal sort of sound for most of your figures and riffs and what have you. And I mention that only because these are not necessarily the most vintage sounding pickups, okay? If you go to the front pickup, you're going to get a classic neck. Shouldn't say classic exactly, but more of a very beady, modern soloing sound. I think it's lovely. What happens when you pull the tone pot up, though, however, is that you actually now get more of what you think of as the classic passive humbucker, or, in this case, in the middle, single coil pickup sort of sound. Let's go to this bridge pickup, and you can see what I mean. I like all the pickups sounds that you get in this sort of voice 2 position, the middle blend. Is a really nice sound as well. With voice 3, and you access this by pulling up the volume pot, regardless of what you've done evidently with the tone pot, then you get these kind of more active sounding pickup blends. And what you're doing here also is you're playing with certain combinations of coil tapping. So the humbuckers may go to more of a single coil voice or more of a humbucker voice, depending, and then again in blend here. All in all, you're going to get about 13 pickup positions or pickup configurations with this guitar. That's a lot. And the sounds are by and large really good. Let's listen to some of them. Here's your sort of classic humbucker, again, with a variety of figures. Here's a nice aggressive sound going to the back pickup, but with this time with voice 3, which I believe gives you more of a single coil tone here. This is going to be voice 1 up here on the neck pickup. Really nice singing sound. terms of distortion sounds, my favorite one on this guitar really has to just be this classic humbucker back here. Just a nice responsive, grainy, sort of creamy sound. Great for sort of metal stuff or even Van Halen type of things, you know. Now, it's worth noting that I'm not actually going through an amp right now. I'm going through the HX Stomp by Line 6. And it's a JVR preset of my own that I call the JVR Angel. And that's using basically the Line 6 emulation of the amazing Angle amp. An amp which has been preferred by my favorite guitarist, Ritchie Blackmore, for quite a number of years. It's bright, aggressive, fat in the bottom, but also fairly tight. And in my opinion, it's a modern-sounding hard rock amp that suits this guitar extremely well. However, there are also some nice other sounds you can get with this guitar, which comes in 3 lovely finishes. This one is called the Orchid Dusk, and it's kind of interestingly, it sort of resembles a dragon fruit, which is, I believe, a Central American fruit, which is ironic given DragonForce's imprimatur all over this guitar. There's also another one called Mantis, which is kind of a yellow, and then the Purple Burst, really cool charcoal black coming into purple. Great finishes on this guitar. A guitar which, one of my few caveats about this guitar is the size of it. Frankly, I find it a little small on the upper bout here for me, especially when I try to stand with it. If you're gonna palm mute, for me, I want a little more arm rest, a little more forearm on that thing. This seems sort of for maybe a slightly smaller body person. I'm only 6'1", but the guitar, again, the body feels a little small to me. That said, let's listen to some of the clean tones with the PRS Chleo SE. Now, I think this is a really respectable guitar for clean sounds. However, I think one needs to be conscious that when you say clean tone, a lot of us, again, depending on our sort of era, we associate clean sounds with maybe a certain era, a certain type of sound. When you're talking about clean sounds with a band like DragonForce, you're perhaps tipping your hat to what we think of as clean when we talk about bands like Vertical Horizon, or maybe a band like Opeth, maybe some of the King Crimson stuff from the 80s, in which it's not noticeably and logically a Strat, Tele, Gibson sort of clean. It's this different clean, and it's a very sort of polished clean. I'm using I believe it's called the archetypal clean on my HX Stomp. Thanks to Line 6 for that, by the way. And even if we just play with some of these in-between positions, you're going to hear some nice coppery, shimmery stuff. Here's voice 3, and you're going to be in the middle position here. You can look up all these configurations online to see exactly what coil taps and what pickup blends they are. But you hear a lot of nice possibilities in here. chorus or whatnot to that, and you've got a really nice range of clean sounds with this guitar. If you want to go brighter, you might go to voice 2, go back to, say, that bridge position, and that passes really nicely for an acoustic guitar sound live in my book. Again, none of these sounds recall a Tele. None of these sounds recall a Strat, even, say, in single coil position. One of the strengths of PRS, though, in my opinion, is that they don't typically sound like Strats or Tele. So this is clearly in that tradition. I'm one of those folks who wonders, perhaps, what wisdom there was in PRS's Silver Sky, since Fender makes a Strat. I'm not sure PRS had to do that, but it was an interesting sort of entry into the market for them nevertheless. That said, this guitar obviously has a lot of versatility. It has a lot of guts, actually, although, again, this is not sort of what a vintage-minded player is going to think of as guts. DragonForce's music is extremely polished to my ears, and extremely clean in terms of its production. To me, it's also very sort of click-track heavy. It's a very precise music. And that kind of precision is one of the hallmarks of Herman Li's playing, and he's a player who takes on exceptional technical demands, honestly, in his pieces. In a way, for me, DragonForce is somewhat in the legacy of bands like Trans-Siberian Orchestra. If that's your sort of sound, by all means, this may well be your sort of guitar. One other caveat. The Herman Li SE, the Chleo SE, rather, retails for somewhere around $2,000, which is definitely not what we typically expect from an SE guitar, which are generally in the range of $600 or $700. Even the David Grissom SE, fantastic guitar, is only about $700. So there has been some eyebrows raised as to why this guitar is so much more for an SE. That said, it does have these pickups, essentially active pickups. There's a battery compartment in here. There's also a USB-C adapter in here. And the guitar finishes are quite lovely. The appointments are really great. The neck is a beautiful satin finish on the back, very smooth. These jumbo frets are also really great. So it certainly has a lot of professional features. In that sense, it is arguably a professional guitar at a different price point. Let's listen to a little more of the guitar in its natural environment, which is more of a hard rock thing. Have it. The new PRS Chleo, the Herman Li signature model with Fishman Omniforce Fluence pickups. Check my review in the pages of Premier Guitar Magazine to learn more about the wood that's used in this, the materials that are used in this, and sort of the straight dope on where this guitar might check in your life. It is certainly a Dragon, and it may well be one that you're interested in slaying. So check it out. Again, this is James Volpe Rotundi for Premier Guitar Magazine with a first look at the PRS Chleo SE.